Wars. Hey guys, Joseph here. As of recording this, Episode 7 of Star Wars, The Force Awakens, has released to theaters. Unfortunately, I won't be able to actually see the episode until, this Sunday. So, I'll get it out then. Until then, why don't I talk about the masterpiece of fan contribution that is the Machete Order. Now, I don't really need to put a whole lot of emphasis into what the Machete Order actually is. You can actually just watch this video of Patton Oswalt. He's kind of describing it. He gives a really good interpretation of what it is, what the good benefits of it are. What I wanted to more focus on in my regard is I wanted to give my opinions and the reasons why I think it is superior. In the shortest definition, the Machete Order is an alternative third way to watching the Star Wars movies, as opposed to the episode order as preferred by George Lucas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the release order, the way that it was the entire idea was introduced to us initially, the release of the films. That order being 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. Both the episode order and the release order have their flaws, and Rod Hilton of NoMacheteJuggling.com understood this. And so he decided to give us an alternative method of watching the films that is, at least in my opinion, vastly superior to the other two. That order being 4, 5, 2, 3, 6. With a basic understanding of what the Machete Order is, let's go into a little bit more detail about what precisely is superior. The 8 reasons to be precise. And let's start off with number 8. No Phantom Menace. As you might have caught on in my introduction part of this video, there is no Episode 1 in Machete Order, and not for the reason you think. Yes, The Phantom Menace is arguably the weakest of the films in the series, but Rod's reason to exclude the film actually has a much more legitimate argument to it. Simply put, everything in Episode 1 is superfluous, because it's either of no use to the overarching narrative of the 6 films, or it's explained better in Episode 2. Because let's come to a realization here as to what the actual overarching story, the overarching narrative of Star Wars is. It's Luke's story, not Anakin's. So everything in the franchise should be working to strengthen Luke's arc, not Anakin Vader's. By eliminating Episode 1, we simplify the overall narrative. We get rid of young Jake Lloyd. We get rid of, superfluous, Sith apprentices. We don't have the trade dispute or the congressional discussions anymore, the Clone Wars, in Episode 2. Now you just have, you have the Civil War. You have these people wanting to secede from the Republic. That's a lot easier for people to get, for people new into the franchise to get into, instead of trade embargoes, which is really difficult to get into. Now, I didn't really hate Episode 1 as much as, everyone else did. I was introduced to the franchise, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, because my parents are Star Wars fans. So they introduced me the way they knew how. But I also acknowledge that Episode 1 does have a lot of superfluous moments. Do we really need to see, Darth Vader as a kid? Not when we can show him at the same age, effectively, as Luke. We can show him as Luke and get the exact same, emotional, them at the exact same emotional phase. And actually, as I'll describe in some later numbers, that actually improves the overarching narrative. Plus, we also get rid of, Chancellor Valorum. We get rid of, this is sort of unfortunate, we get rid of Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul, but what makes it so cool is that you don't have to watch Episode 1. You can, it still works, but you don't have to. You can watch it in much the same way as you would watch the Star Wars Clone Wars TV show, or Rebels, or the Clone Wars movie. You don't have to see them, but they strengthen, they become an anthology. They become expanded lore that you can, but it's not part of the central arc. That, of course, being Luke's arc. Oh, and the exclusion from episode 1 also adds a nice little other bonus that we will include in number 7, the diminished role of Jar Jar Binks. This might be a little controversial, but growing up I didn't actually hate Jar Jar Binks.
Ooh, you suck!
I mean, owing to the fact that I was 6 years old at the time, I really didn't get any racial or offensive things about him. I just sort of thought he was like bad humor. He was harmless to me. It didn't take away from the overall awesome lightsaber fight and all that stuff. That being said, as I got older, his comedy did sort of start to wane on me and grate. So, having the Machete order actually doesn't eliminate the character, because in the later movies, episode 2 and episode 3, he does have an important role. Just a more diminished, a more subtle one. And one I think actually is actually really important. If you get rid of episode 1, by eliminating episode 1 and putting episodes 2 and 3, you transform Jar Jar Binks from this, insufferable lackwit who just so happens to get to his positions through sheer luck into this really tragic figure. He's this well-intentioned, well-meaning, representative, just junior senator that, just is trying to do what he thinks is right. But he's tricked by people who are far more powerful than him. If you go in not knowing episode 1 at all, Jar Jar Binks suddenly becomes this really depressing character. And I think that's what makes this so masterful. The Machete Order took a character that many people could grow to hate, and just by excluding what made him look bad and emphasizing what he did in the context of the rest of the series, it actually makes him an important and, in many ways, sympathetic character. It made Jar Jar Binks sympathetic. Is that not incredible? Of course, the rising role of Jar Jar Binks, and we figure out his whole tragedy through the Machete Order, also brings it to light. Number 6, the rise of the Emperor. Now, here's the thing. This is one of the few surprises that the prequels actually tried to do. Unfortunately, episode 1 doesn't do this quite well. Episode 1 shows us Darth Sidious. We see Darth Sidious all the time, and it's so easy, so easy to figure out who Darth Sidious really is. You get rid of episode 1, though, Darth Sidious only shows up in 2 scenes before his big reveal in episode 3. And that's short enough to know the reality that the Emperor, the relationship between the Supreme Chancellor and the Emperor, stays a secret throughout episodes 2 and 3. So, if you watch episodes 4 and 5, you see the Emperor in part 5, but you only see him as he looks, with the disheveled face, the hooded mask. He looks like Darth Sidious. When you don't see the Supreme Chancellor, you never hear the Emperor referred to by his name, and then you see episodes 2 and 3, and you see the Supreme Chancellor eventually rise to the position that he comes in. It becomes a nice shock, a nice surprise for anyone who hasn't seen the films. So, by excluding episode 1 and putting, 2 and 3 right next to 4 and 5, you actually build up the Emperor as a frightening character. And you just, instead of just being, the guy who's holding Vader's leash, you actually see him as this great manipulator, this great evil villain, because the Emperor is one of the greatest movie villains of all time. And we see this. It's actually strengthened by putting 2 and 3 right after 4 and 5. And then when you get to 6, you've built up who the Emperor is not only through 4 and 5, but also you've now seen just how manipulative, just how dark and evil the Emperor is in 2 and 3. And then in part 6, the Emperor is now a villain worthy of the final fight between Luke, Vader, and Palpatine. And talking about the endings brings me to number 5, starting and ending on a high note. This is something that both orders fail in, and they don't mean to. They really don't. Release order 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3 ends with episode 3, which is a super downer. The Jedi are dead. Vader has risen. The Death Star is ready to be, is being constructed. Everything is going wrong, and that's how you end it in episode order. In release order. In episode order, it ends with, episode 6, the Ewoks, yub yub. Yub yub. You end it with that, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. You need to end it there, because that's how it should end. That's a conclusion. It starts with episode 1. I think we've already described why that's maybe not the best option, particularly if you're trying to introduce people into the series. By starting it off with episode 4, you start off with this really high point. You started off with a high point, and then you go to episode 5, downer. Episode 2, mix. Episode 3, super downer. You start off high with introducing the world, and then you slowly go down and down and down, and then suddenly, shoot right through the roof with the climax. And it ends on a triumphant note. It starts triumphant and it ends triumphant. This is what we, in, the storytelling department, call an arc. And it's important. That's the main problem with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is that if you watch 1, 2, and 3, before 4, 5, and 6, 1, 2, and 3 have very little importance, and they're almost entirely dependent upon having some context to 4, 5, and 6. That's why he makes constant references and in-jokes. I have a bad feeling about this. Boring conversation anyway. He has those references to the original series. Unless you've seen the original series, you miss those. So, obviously you can't watch 1, 2, and 3 without knowing 4, 5, and 6. But watching 4, 5, and 6, and then 1, 2, and 3 leaves you on just this downer note. By putting 4, 5, 2, 3, 6, things get better, and it ends strongly. Moving on to number 4, we have the tragedy of Yoda. You know what? This is one of the cool things, and this is actually going to be one of the later numbers as well, that Yoda's reveal is spectacular, and it's vitally important. And this franchise, by putting 5, you get Yoda's reveal, and you still get it. And I'm actually going to talk about that in a later number, but basically to say, when Yoda talks about how evil the Emperor is, and how evil Darth Vader is, you're talking, you're kind of going like, oh, he is this super powerful guy. He's this super awesome, powerful guy. We don't see any of that. But after 5, you get into 2 and 3, and you suddenly get Yoda's backstory. And then you realize, he fought Count Dooku. He fought the Emperor and failed. So in episode 6, when he's talking to Luke and saying, only a full-fledged Jedi will be able to defeat the Emperor and Vader, he's not talking just out of his butt. He's talking out of someone who failed. Suddenly Yoda becomes this, do what I cannot, succeed where I failed, Luke Skywalker. That's depressing. That's so sad. And it makes it a really dynamic character. Suddenly, Yoda isn't just this wise teacher. He's a tragic figure. He's someone who needs to be redeemed just as much as Anakin, but redeemed in a different way. His mistakes and errors need to be corrected. And what's really cool is that in episodes 2, we start to see sort of Yoda's pride, his ego. Obi-Wan telling him in episode 3, let me face the Emperor. I cannot defeat Vader. And Yoda going, you are not powerful enough to defeat the Emperor. But I am. Except he's not. And because of that, the Empire wins in episode 3. Yoda suddenly becomes this character that needs to be redeemed as well. His errors must be corrected. And it's up to Luke and his friends to fix Yoda and Obi-Wan's mistakes. This is how you create great drama, and this is why the Machete order works so well. Number 3, Anakin's romance and redemption. Another advantage of removing episode 1? You don't have a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old on screen supposed to be having romantic chemistry. Rather, if you go to episode 2 and then episode 3, Anakin and Padme basically look the exact same age. They look the same age, and so their romance, which is a vital and critical piece of Anakin's fall to the dark side, is, is more believable, and it needs to be believable. Oh my god, romances in films need to feel natural. And yes, episode 2 is not natural. But good god, does episode 1 not help episode 2 in making a natural romance. However, it does, by eliminating episode 1, it does improve that. And by making this a little bit more easier to stomach, I guess, it also makes his redemption in episode 6 more important, because it puts Anakin's story in the context of Luke's story. Episodes 2 and episode 4 match each other in a lot of ways, but where one ends triumphantly, Luke victorious, the other ends negatively. Anakin and them fail, and the Clone Wars start. And then you get episodes 5 and episodes 3. Luke faces Vader and has the chance to fall to the dark side. He might. We don't know. It ends before he goes to that point. And then you get Anakin's story. He makes his choice and he fails. He falls to the dark side. And so when you get into episode 6, you've seen how Anakin rose and fell. And then you see Luke in episode 6 dressed all in black, like Anakin was in the prequels. You see him force choking people, like Anakin in the prequels. And so Luke and Luke's possible fall to the dark side and Anakin's redemption to the light now become more natural, because now you have made Anakin and Luke's stories linked. Now their fates are tied, which they need to be, because ultimately Luke's arc helps to define Anakin's. And that's what makes them both stronger, by showing a believable romance, a believable redemption, by putting episodes 2 and 3 in the context of 4 and 5. In addition, it will also allow more explanation for why young Anakin, played by Hayden Christensen, is amongst the Force Ghosts at the end of episode 6. It's a stupid mistake, and I don't like it. Why do you have to dish Sebastian Shaw? But you got to do what you got to do. If you want to make a change, this is all working upon, if you got to keep the special editions, how do we improve the franchise overall? And the Machete Order does that, even if we have to get rid of the better actor. Number 2, the Force in balance. This is one of the cooler aspects, and I've talked about it earlier in this video. Narrative flow and the narrative arc. You're constantly rising action, climaxing, and then resolution. These are concepts that are very important for, strengthening your film's themes and motifs. Particularly, it's strengthened through the use of patterns. And the more patterns you can have in a film, subtly, the stronger your film ultimately can be in delivering an epic story. And the Machete Order gives a great pattern, a fantastic pattern, because it starts with 4-5 Luke stories, Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. Episode 4 starts off with Luke as this impetuous teenage youth on Tatooine, and The Empire Strikes Back ends on a downer. Episode 2 starts with, Anakin as this impetuous young youth going to Tatooine. And it ends on a downer where, we have seen the rise of Vader, the death of the Jedi, the construction of the Death Star, and the rise of the New Hope. So, they end at the exact same point from a narrative standpoint, at the lowest points for both characters. And so when we get introduced to episode 6, we now see that low point build up for both of them until you get to the climax, the fight between the Emperor, Vader, and Luke. And finally, the pattern concludes, the resolution goes through, and both characters are for the better. They've improved. Yes, one's dead, but they're improved. And that's why this order works so well, because it creates the semblance of order within the order. 4-5, 2-3, 6. Fantastic. I geek out when I think about just how many. I'm a big film nerd, so seeing that, just arranging how a film can be seen, or how a series of films can be seen, how it can improve the overall narrative, I think is tremendously fascinating, and it's why I love the Machete Order so much. Now, we are approaching the number one reason why I think the Machete Order is superior. And this is the one I tell everybody when they go like, well, why do you like the Machete Order? That doesn't change much. I disagree, and here is the reason. Number one, all the twists. Not some of the twists, not a few of the twists, all of the twists. Star Wars is tremendously reliant upon plot twists for a lot of their dramatic and epic moments. And let's think about this. Let's really think about this. What moments are, what are the big twists? Who Yoda is, who Vader is, the relationship between Luke and Leia, how the Jedi disappear, who the Emperor is. Really big plot twists, that upend everything you know in the franchise. But whenever, depending upon the order, you only get a few of them, or some of them don't work as well because of the 6-film order. For example, if we go in episode order, remember that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then you get, the reveal of who the Emperor is, and the reveal of the relationship between Luke and Leia. But you're basically spoiled on everything else. Well, that's simple, right? That's simple. We just watch them in 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, right? Wrong. Because in episodes 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, you do get the reveal of who Yoda is, you get the reveal of who, Vader is. The relationship between Luke and Leia, however, it's really weak. Like, it's not even worth, anything. And that reveal of the relationship between Luke and Leia also has a negative aspect in episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, in the episode order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because if you've only seen episodes 1, 2, and 3, who the hell are Luke and Leia? And why are they important? It's a contradiction. If you know who Luke and Leia are, then it's not a surprise to you, the relationship. But if you've already seen, 4 and 5, the way they deliver it in episode 6 isn't that good. So, 4, 5, 2, 3, 6 gives us the Yoda reveal in episode 5, the Vader reveal in episode 5. In episodes 3, you get the reveal of who the Emperor is, which is a new one. You actually see the rise of the Empire and the Emperor. That's a fantastic twist, as I described earlier in the video. You see the rise of the Emperor. You get the reveal, out of nowhere, that Luke and Leia are twins in episode 3. That's amazing! You wouldn't see that coming, and it's done much better if you watch episode 3 after 4 and 5. You now have the context of who Luke and Leia are, and you know that there's supposed, at the end of episode 5, he's like, no, there is another. Wait, there's another Skywalker? What is he talking about? What's he talking about? Ben, what's he saying? We don't get an answer. So you see episode 3, Luke, Leia.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
And that's how that reaction should go. The completely natural...
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
And that's why those twists work so well. We see the death of the Jedi, which I think is the strongest scene in any of the prequels. The death of the Jedi is fantastic, and it's so tragic. The music, everything. But all of those plot twists build upon each other and make the Machete Order the best 4 twists. And if you show somebody, if you show someone who's never seen Star Wars, those scenes are what really make it stick in my mind and really make everything work out fantastic. So those are the 8 reasons why I think the Machete Order is superior. Does everything work? No. Unfortunately, episode 2 has the Tatooine sequence, which, unless you've seen episode 1, is going to be a little confusing to people, but you should be able to follow it enough, because they do mention who is Shmi, like, we introduce ourselves to the Lars family, we get all that. So it sort of works, and you can kind of push your way through it. And then you also have the C-3PO thing, but that's sort of, that's the thing that you can eventually watch episode 1 in the anthologies and go, hey, that's how that works. Also, you sort of get the unfortunate thing of, well, wait, the clones started now? Was that introduced in episode 1? Like, did we go to Camino in episode 1? Are we skipping something because we went straight to episode 2 instead of episode 1? No, they never explained it in episode 1. This is just bad storytelling. They just didn't say, they don't tell us who Sifo-Dyas is. Oh, Okay, move on. So there are flaws in the Machete order, but I think compared to the episode order and the release order, the Machete order is definitely the strongest of the three, and I highly recommend it. I watched it with my family, and my family are sort of those kinds of people that just watch films for their own pure enjoyment. They don't look at them critically necessarily, and they tend to just like the films however they are. They love episode 1. They refuse to say anything bad about episode 1. I, however, did enjoy it tremendously. If you're going to introduce Star Wars to new people, introduce them to the Machete order, because that really is the best way to go forward, I think. So I give this order my full recommendation, and I cannot wait to see the extension to the series with episode 7. And who knows, maybe after episode 7, 8, and 9, we'll be able to create a brand new order that sees things even more creatively, that, expands things out even farther than we could possibly imagine. Maybe make a supercut of some kind, with all 9 films. Who knows? That is entirely possible. I would be totally okay with that. So that's the conclusion of these critical vlogs. If you guys want to see some more of my stuff, you guys can support me on my website at phoenixaproductions.blogspot.com. You can also visit my Brony Critic channel for more My Little Pony content, as well as the Brony Critic channel Patreon page. I highly recommend you guys check those out if you have any interest in My Little Pony. I think you guys would have some fun with those. So I'll see you guys next time when I review Star Wars The Force Unleashed Episode 7. Until then, this has been Critical Vlogs. See y'all next time.